Greetings, brothers and sisters within the Kingdom of England Empire of Albion. It is I, your humble noble brother, DeonBelmont from the illustrious Noble House of Belmont. I apologize for the technicalities on the live. I thought I was actually playing, but I guess I didn't transition to the next page. But, with this Mercury retrograde, expect delays and situations of this magnitude when it comes down to communication happening. For those of you who don't know, here at the Noble House of Belmont, we do deal with astrology because astrology, or the planets above, they do influence, but they do not compel. So they do have influence on our reality and how we operate. And so we're just going to go ahead and go along with the punches, so that way we don't miss a beat at all. So today is March 9th, 2976 of the Berber calendar, which is once again equivalent to your 2024, 2026 Gregorian calendar. And here at the Noble House of Belmont and the English Empire, we always love to say it's a beautiful time to be alive. I love to give honors to our Creator, our divine Heavenly Father, as well as our earthly divine mother. I have to give honors to our saints, martyrs, our kings and queens who have come and gone, our ancestors who have come and gone, those who have paved the way for us to be able to have a voice today. And for those long lost brothers and sisters, I apologize about this. I'm trying to fix something real quick. But also, like I said, for those brothers and sisters who are doing random acts and good deeds all the time here within the realm that we like to call the English Empire. And also for those of you who are scattered amongst the four corners of the world who are doing the random acts and good deeds all the time, wherever you are, because we are now living underneath a time of a lot of pain, sorrow, and bloodshed that is very, very impactful on our lives right now. And as people are going to be migrating and going to different places, historically, you needed to know who you were. And that's the reason why these lessons that I've been doing are all about that. So therefore, wherever you are in the world, you don't lose track of who you are and where you come from. In this lesson today, I'm going to allow Brother Mike Epps, from his own mouth, in his latest stand-up comedy, which was called Delusional on Netflix, he spoke a joke talking about his ancestry and, some of the things he ended up doing. But as it may be a joke, the truth is embedded within that joke. And the truth I'm speaking in regards to is how many of you brothers and sisters also have European ancestry. So the title says, or the question is, Mike Epps has European ancestry. Well, we're going to go ahead and let him say it out of his own mouth. So for those of you who are just now getting the opportunity to hear my voice, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Please leave a comment down below, letting me know that you're paying attention to the videos and whatever questions you may have yourself. Once again, I have to give honors to our king, our queen, the trustees, those brothers and sisters who have obligation to do what they know is embedded in their heart, and which is righteousness. Hopefully, those of you who are paying attention to these videos are following that type of path, which we call the righteous path. And information of this magnitude, especially when it comes down to who you are, should be done in a righteous and a noble way, because with great, power, which is who you are as these people who have set the paved the way for us to exist. You are their power. You are what they set down and put all their energy into to exist. You are that energy. So remember, the people is the power. The power is in the people. And you are those folks, like I said, descendants. So I don't want to get too far into that without going ahead and get started with this video. Give me 1 second, because I'm trying to change this title, because unfortunately it has the wrong title up, which we did the Frederick Douglass yesterday. Frederick Douglass was the one we had did yesterday, and today we're doing Mike Epps. Give me 1 second. It seems crazy because it doesn't even allow me to change it like this. One second. You know, it's crazy because once you once you got stuff set up, you always going to have some type of technicality just going to pop up. It never fails. Never fails. All right. Okay, so I finally got it. All right, so with that being said, like I said, this video is recently comedian Mike Epps. He had made the joke on his Netflix stand-up talking about, you know, he was white. Many people laugh at lines like that, but behind the humor is actually a serious historical reality. And like I said before, large numbers of Americans, especially those who identify as African Americans or black, do in fact have European ancestry due to the long, complex history of the United States. So let's go ahead and allow our funny brother, Mike Epps, go ahead and tell this joke. This is for educational purposes for those of you who are, you know, watching this YouTube wise. So I don't want to get any copyright strikes or anything of that nature. Please, if you can, your contribution to the channel, the Noble House of Belmont, is very much appreciated. So if you want to Cashapp, there, the Cashapp information is right there down at the ticker. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. It's crazy because I actually thought that I had it set up. Sorry about that. It's my fault again. All right, here we go.
I'm 55 years old. I'm thinking I'm a black man, back to the back. I've been calling white people crackers and all kind of shit I ain't supposed to be saying about white people.
Yeah, and you know, please apologize for the language that's being utilized, but like I said, look over, that. Just pay attention to what he's saying.
I go to Africa, I ain't never going back over again. Because I'm thinking I'm black. Man, I'm getting my bag, and two African dudes over there, I'm about to say, they're not like us. I said, who? We ain't like y'all. You talking about me?
All right, so I apologize for the laugh. You're gonna probably hear me laugh on this part because the way he's telling the joke, it is hilarious. But what he said, from what the brother over there in Africa said, they're not like us. It's because a lot of them and throughout the world know the truth about the descendants here in America. They know that many of us come from many different places and origins, but mostly they know that many of us are actually European or have European ancestry. And, and many of us also, too, here are from here. The original Americans, the indigenous Americans are all copper-colored, red people, those who you identify called Negro and Black today. So we have been mixed up like like they call it a melting pot. Melanated people from all over the world through the colonial transatlantic slave era, who were brought over here, but also those who were already here, and it wasn't just so-called slavery, but also indentured servitude. So there's many different reasons why, it's just a complete mixture over here. But because of the understanding that many folks have historically, they're going to put it underneath colonial transatlantic slave time frame to get a more of a understanding of why it's a big mixture. All right, let's go ahead and continue. All right, so like he said, the brother told him, no, no. You need to go do your ancestry. You need to go do your ancestry.com. And ancestry.com is what's one of the easiest or one of the easier platforms or search engines or archive websites you can use to help you piece your ancestry together. Now, it's not going to be easy, and Ancestry.com is not going to work for everyone. So I don't want you to think when you go on there and start doing the research that you're coming up empty-handed and that's just it. No, you got to go do some work, brothers and sisters, because a lot of our ancestors were in positions where they couldn't keep records, or the records got lost for whatever situation here or there. But it doesn't mean that you can't find that information, because during this time, they kept great records. They had to know who was here. And I'm not saying folks didn't come here, without records. Of course, there's going to be situations where that is, what happened, but that's not for everyone, and I know that for sure because I was able to find records that I didn't think I was able to find. And I see a lot of other brothers and sisters who have came to me and shown me the records they was able to find very easy, very, very easy, easily without, having to have anybody else, like a third-party genealogist, doing the work for them. So those of you who may have to do that, it's not something that's cheap. So I would say you're going to have to start changing your lifestyle around and how you spend your money, especially if this is something you want to do, and you're going to have to start investing in it, so you are an investment. This is probably one of the best investments that you can do this day and time, to be able to have records, to be able to have your paperwork, to be able to prove who you are, where you come from, without doubt or contradiction. And I know this is important because, it's like when I used to be a dog breeder, I knew that having the records and information of my dogs was important, especially if I wanted to, put them in the show ring or do anything that I felt was highly respected. And they would ask you, what is your dog's pedigree? Well, if your dog didn't have no paperwork, from a reputable registry like either the AKC, the UKC, and new registries popping up every day nowadays, but those were considered the most reputable during my time. And if your dog didn't have these papers, then people weren't interested in what you had. They weren't interested in the dog as much, especially if you, like I said, if you wanted to compete and showmanship or Schutzen or other competition with your dog. And then also too for genetics, for health purposes, you know, you wanted to know the dogs you have, you know, where it came from, what issues they had potentially. You can end up, you know, bringing it to your household, or your breeding system. And this is not just in dogs. This is also in cattle, horses, equine, which are horses, and various other, you know, and animal hobbies. But this is something that, you know, modern humans just don't see as important anymore, which is a very disheartening thing to say and to hear, because you want to know where you come from, and then also want to know this information for medical purposes. You know, blood transfusions, things of this nature are important to know who you come from, and their you know, and how their genetics can potentially affect you, because you are who you come from, no matter what you believe or what you don't want to accept. This is the truth, so you should know where you come from, because also your diet, you know, many people don't realize where you come from is going to determine, like I said, what type of foods you eat. You know, the things you should be able to get, you know, in your diet, you may not be able to get where you live at right now, because of, you know, you're not living in the proper location. You know, so this is important, and this is information you should know, brother, sister. But let's go ahead and continue in the video. All right, you hear that? So that's that's what he pretty much said off of, you know, I'm gonna finish letting it play again, but he said the box popped up, said that he was white, you know. Now everyone is laughing in the audience, but because of the joke, or because of who he is, it doesn't bother them. It doesn't make, you know, it's not like giving them the type of response that they should actually be accepting. They should like, what? They laughing at it. All right, so my bad. So that's all that I actually wanted to show on that. I don't want to go no further on the video. He's hilarious, brother. By the way, I grew up watching Mike Epps, his movies, stand-up comedy, and, you know, always been tickled, you know, after watching his work. So once again, thank you, brother Mike Epps, for, you know, giving us that information within this joke that you told. But we're going to go ahead and use what you said to segue into the next part of this lesson. And that is, we're going to House of Names. So I wanted to use brother Mike Epps' surname, which is Epps, to do the research and the background of where his family potentially came from. Especially, he said he's white. Now, I want to go to another slide first before I go into this one, but I'm going to go back and forth on the slide, so that way you can kind of get a better idea of what I'm going at. So Epps, history, family crest, and coat of arms. And the origins available: England and Germany. Now, of course, I can't say he's not from Germany, because we know the original people from Germany also were known to be the brown Alpine race, or descendants of the Mediterranean race, or whatever. But we know historically the indigenous original people from Europe were brown people. But that's not the point. The point is, we want to know what nation, what kingdom that potentially he comes from. Well, he speaks English. He's in a territory that was predominantly underneath, not only because he's from Indianapolis, so we're just going to say his family's originally from Indianapolis area, Indiana. So we're going to just say that territory all the way to the eastern seaboard was underneath French occupation and British or English occupation. So with that understanding, then I would say he would be more English, because of British occupation of that territory at the time. So it says, etymology of Epps. The ancestors of the name Epps date back to the days of the Anglo-Saxon tribes of Britain. So right there we have from the etymology of his surname, it goes back to England, and which goes back to the Anglo-Saxon tribes of Britain. Now, we already have done the video in regards to what Thomas William Shore from the origins of Anglo-Saxon tribes. Let's go ahead and go back to there so you can read it and see it for yourself. Our Darker Forefathers, page 111, chapter 7. The consideration of the evidence of people of a brunette complexions were among the Anglo-Saxon settlers in England leads us to the people of a still darker hue, the dark black or brown black settlers. Probably there must have been some of these among the Anglo-Saxons, for we meet with the personals named Blackman, Blackman, Blackaman, Blackaman, Blacksonna, Blacka, Blanchman, in various documents of the period. All right, so I read this pretty much all the time because we're going to have new viewers who are not going to know this information. So I'm just going to use this as a reference for them each time, so that way they can kind of get an idea who, authors, and he was just not the author, he was an ethnologist as well as an anthropologist, and these are writers who come from that territory, not only that territory, but they were prominent figures who was writing these books. So it's just not like a regular Joe Schmo on the streets. The same kind of evidence is met with among the oldest place names, Blackmanburg, and mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Charter. And then we're going to go to page, I'm going to finish. Then the places called Blackmanstone in Dorset and Blackmanstone in Kent were on or quite close to the coast, a circumstance which points to the settlers having come to these places by water rather than to a survival of black people of the old Celtic race. So just letting you know that melanated people with the original old Celtic race and having been left in them among old place names of the same kind in various counties, some of which are met with later but still old records. We find Blackney in Gloucestershire, Blackney in Norfolk, Blackenham in Suffolk, Blackmere in ancient Hamlet, Blacksware near Ware in Herefordshire. The Hereford name is worthy of note in reference to have been said concerning the brunettes, which we know means brown, in that county at the present time. So we just go back to brother Mike Epps. He definitely fits the description, even that side profile. Like he said, looks like the man on the dime. But it goes back to the Anglo-Saxon tribes. Epps. The Anglo-Saxon tribes of Britain. Okay. Now, folks may say, okay, well, that's what I say, and he said he's white. Well, let's say what the term white means and who that applies to based off of. This is coming from your federal government. I try to see if I can find it 2026, but 2024 is the latest version. So we're going to utilize the 2024, and it's coming from the OMB Statistical Policy Directive 15 on race and ethnicity data standards. So this is not my definition. This is not how I define race. This is what the federal government that you're citizens of recognize race as, which when you use the terminology, you're utilizing it based off of what you feel and think, based off of emotions, instead of from historical standpoint, from anthropologists or ethnologists, and you're not utilizing it from what the federal government says, and this is a problem. So to correct these issues, we have to, like I said, travel back in time. You need to understand how your government defines these terms, because, like I said, your reality is based off of what they allow. So how they define these terms, and then you need to know how these terms were defined historically before the creation of your reality you exist in today. All right. So it says the 2024 Statistical Policy Directive number 15. On March 28th, the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, published a set of revisions to Statistical Policy Directive number 15, Standards for Maintaining, Collecting, and Presenting Federal Data on Race and Ethnicity, SPD 15, the first since 1997. These revisions will, so this is the first revision since 1997. So this is what they recognize these terms, races or ethnicity, to be based off of 2024. These revisions will enhance the ability to compare information and data across federal agencies, and also to understand how well federal programs serve as diverse America. For access ease, this site breaks down the updated standards into its 6 parts as shown below. Also, OMB's official notice announcing the revisions can be found in the Federal Register, in addition to including the revised standards. The notices includes explanations for the revisions by describing the initial proposals of the Interagency Working Group on Race and Ethnicity Standards, summarizing public input, describing final recommendations of the working group and how they differed, if at all, from the initial proposals, and presenting and explaining OMB's decisions. So this itself is what they utilize all across the board. Every federal agency that you can think of, they all utilize this. So from the federal level to the state level, how one organization or how one agency defined you, they all have to define you based off of what the federal government, from which we're going to be reading, based off the standards for maintaining, collecting, and presenting federal data on race and ethnicity. So these is not my words. This is not from the ethnologists, the anthropologists, from science, none of this. This is what the federal government, this is what they choose to use. And since, once again, you're citizens of theirs, you have to go by that. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so instead of trying to create new definitions, because it's not going to work, understand how things are defined within their world. Sorry about that. All right. So this is, once again, the standards for maintaining, collecting, and presenting federal data on race and ethnicity. This statistical policy directive provides the standards for maintaining, collecting, and presenting race and ethnicity data for all federal information collection and reporting purposes. Once again, this is for the federal level all the way down to the state level. The categories in these standards are understood to be social-political constructs. So a social political construct is literally someone else's agenda, and are not an attempt to define race and ethnicity biologically or genetically. So the federal government don't deal with race from an ethnic biological standpoint or genetic standpoint. So it doesn't deal with science. So once again, when you try to identify yourself within the federal level, they don't go based off of biology or science or how, like what I say, how anthropologists or ethnologists have defined this based off of their research. All right. So once again, this will hopefully remove a lot of that confusion. All right. It says the standards do not require any agency or program to collect race and ethnicity data. Rather, they provide a common language for uniformity and comparability in the collection and use of race and ethnicity data by federal agencies. The standards have 7 minimum categories for data on race and ethnicity: American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Middle Eastern or North African, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander and white. All right, so that's what they use. And brother Mike Epps, once again, he said he was white. So let's go ahead and see what white means according to the federal government. Excuse me. Go back. So the categories and definitions, we're going to go straight to that. One, categories and definitions. So we ain't going to worry about American Indian or Alaska Native because he didn't say that. 1 second. All right, like I said, as always, on days when you try to present information, try to you start having problems. All right. He didn't claim to be Asian, and he said he used to claim to be Black or African American. So he's, like it says, individuals with origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa, including, for example, African American, Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian, Ethiopian, and Somali. Now, he said that they told him over there, like, nah, you're not like us. And they told him to do his ancestry.com. He said no, he was a Black American. So they told him, no, you're not a Black American, which would have put him underneath him calling himself Black or African American. So they told him, nah, that's not who you are. You need to do your ancestry.com. So which brought him down to here: white individuals with origins in any of the original peoples, keyword, original peoples of Europe, including, for example, English, German, Irish, Italian, Polish, and Scottish. Now, his surname, Epps, like they said, goes back to the Anglo-Saxon tribes of Britain, but we see he had England and Germany. So Epps is tied to England and Germany, which qualifies based off of his origin of his ancestry, the original peoples of Europe, including, for example, English and German. Now, you're probably asking and wonder, well, how do you know that that's how those original people look? All right, well, we already went through from anthropologists as well ethnologists research, which told you the Anglo-Saxons were brunette. And we know the Anglo-Saxons themselves were considered Germanic people, which can go back to those people who encompassed the territory Anglo-Saxon, Anglia, Saxony, like Saxony, Germany, and then the Jutes. And Saxony, once again, a lot of our brothers and sisters actually come from there. They just don't know it. And then we're going to go from science. Genetic study reveals surprising ancestry of many Americans. Some African Americans, European Americans, and Latinos carry genes that don't match their self identified ethnicities. So, like I said, brothers and sisters, your skin tone does not denote uh, your ancestry. It does not tell you where you come from. Your genealogy will tell you where you come from. And that's the reason why it's important for you to do that. If you want to know your family history and, potentially what inheritance and inheritments that you may have. And us as English people, we do have that. It's just that you have to come into proper line of succession. All right. So it says, a new study shows that Latinos in the Southwest have more Native American ancestry than Latinos in the South and Northeast, where proportions of European and African ancestry are higher. In the United States, almost no one can trace their ancestry to just one place. And for many, the past may hold some surprises. According to a new study, researchers have found that a significant percentage of African Americans, European Americans, and Latinos carry ancestry from outside their self-identified ethnicity. Now, we're going to focus on Mike Epps because ethnicity when he thought that he was black, and then he did his ancestry and said that he's white. So the average African American genome, for example, is nearly a quarter European. All right, so this is from off the science telling that the average African American genome is a quarter European. And this is coming from science, science.org. Article, genetic study reveals surprising ancestry of many Americans. All right, it says up until recently, human population geneticists have tended to ignore the U.S., says Joanna Mountain, a geneticist and senior director of research at 23andMe, a company in Mountain View, California that offers genetic testing. With its long history of migrations from around the world, she says, the country was considered to be kind of messy in terms of genetics. But Mountain and her colleagues thought that might have fighting chance of deciphering Americans' complex genetic ancestry. Their secret weapon, 23andMe's huge database of genetic information. Now, once again, we already know from the N. Ray Ahmad Hassan case regarding citizenship, that the United States utilized genealogy to trace yourself back to the group that you claim to descend from. So utilizing DNA wouldn't matter because, once again, they don't use DNA from a genetics standpoint, ethnological position. They use genealogy. And this is during the time when the Naturalization Act was created, which was in 1790. So that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for this in regards to proving the claim, even though this does hold weight and value to those of you who do your genealogy, because it should correspond with the information that you find. So they should be in tandem. And one thing that we can say that is accurate, that on both sides can agree with, is that those who identify or claim to be African American do have European ancestry. Where from, that is up for debate based off of the research that you do. And in the meantime, this is what science as well, the federal level, recognize. So they recognize Europeans to be white, and they recognize those Europeans who are English to be white. Mike Epps has English ancestry based off of his research and showing that Epps itself is an Anglo-Saxon name. And not only is an Anglo-Saxon name, but we know the Anglo-Saxons are the English people, or the English people make up the Anglo-Saxons, and the other groups too, but the English makes up with the Anglo-Saxons. All right, so we're going to move on from this because this is from modern day science in corroborating that African Americans have nearly a quarter European ancestry, and also going to be more, because many of those who would be considered brown Europeans didn't always necessarily mix up with those who they say will identify as African or African American. Um, but we know we've all been mixed up and been placed underneath these misnomers. So it's really about, like I said, once you do your research, science from the modern reality may not always corroborate with what they had said historically. All right, and that's moving forward. So we want to go to, because we know that they were talking about the Mediterranean race from Thomas William Shore when it was explaining the origins of the Europeans. And they were saying the Europeans also came from not just the Alpine race, but the Mediterranean race. They said that the Alpine race, Mediterranean race, and the Nordic races all pretty much come from the same common stock, but broke off throughout time. And this is their understanding during the time when they were trying to classify humans and put them in certain categories. Now today, modern science they don't look at this any longer. They feel that all of this is considered it should be obsolete, but not only obsolete, but they feel it was a form of racism. Well, we're dealing with the science. This has nothing to do at this moment. This research is only to show how they saw and they recognized people during the time of colonial occupation, which still affects us today because of who we are. And specific people here have a genealogy or have a lineage that ties them back to certain folks who will be classified under these classifications, but they don't know who they are because of, our modern day reality have them all completely mixed up underneath whatever form that they self-identify as via the categories of the race and ethnicity data standards of the federal government of the United States. So once again, they don't deal with it from the science. This is all about you self-identifying. And if you self-identify, you have to prove it via genealogy, not by science. Even though genealogy, in my opinion, is almost like a form of science, but they don't see it that way. All right, so let's go ahead and read about the Mediterranean race. Once again, these terms, they don't use any longer today for whatever reason. I can't tell you why, but for the argument of this lecture, we're going to go ahead and go and utilize these terms because this is what they were utilizing before, our time. So it says the Mediterranean race is an obsolete racial classification of humans based on the now disproven theory of biological race. According to writers of the late 19th to mid 20th centuries, it was a sub-race of the Caucasian race. All right, so they're telling you that the Mediterranean race, once again, is a branch of the Caucasian race. And for those of you who've been paying attention to a lot of my earlier lessons will know that the Caucasian race can be traced, go back to the ancient Kokian or Cochise, and those folks, according to anecdotal evidence, were considered a darker complexion people. In this case, we can consider folks who we say are black or brown today, which makes sense, especially the Mediterranean race, which we know that territory historically has always known to be a darker complexion people, all the way to a people who they consider olive colored. All right, so in various definitions, it was said to be prevalent in the Mediterranean basin and areas near the Mediterranean and Black Sea, especially in southern Europe, Eastern Europe, North Africa, most of West Asia, the Middle East or Near East, Western Central Asia, parts of South Asia, and parts of the Horn of Africa. To a lesser extent, certain populations of people in Ireland and western parts of Great Britain, despite living far from the Mediterranean, were thought to have some minority Mediterranean elements in their populations, such as Wales and Cornwall. Irish people with black hair and dark complexions were said to be the descendants of Spanish sailors shipwrecked during the Spanish Armada of 1588 and were often referred to as Black Irish, particularly in the United States. Pause. Excuse me. So, like they're telling you, the Mediterranean race, or those who are known to be the Mediterranean race, extent was not only in the territory that we say East Asia, or excuse me, East Europe, all the way to West Asia, but to the territory that we call Great Britain. All right, so now they're giving you an extent of what those brown or those dark complexion people that are brunettes that Thomas William Shore spoke about in his book, The Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race. All right. So it says Carlton S. Kuhn characterized the subgroup as having shorter or medium, not tall stature, long dolichocephalic, so dolichocephalic or dolichocephalic or moderate mesocephalic skull, a narrow and often slightly aquiline nose that's like an eagle, the prevalence of dark eyes and hair, and frequently darker skin ranging from cream to tan or dark brown skin tone, olive complexion being especially common and epitomizing the supposed Mediterranean race. But you see dark brown skin tone as fitting the description of Brother Mike Epps. He also has what? The aquiline nose. He also has the nose. All right. I'm going to pass some of this because it's not important to me for this purpose. All right, so we're going to talk about 20th century Giuseppe Sergi. All right, so it said Giuseppe Sergi, who's also, too, for those of you who read the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, they actually have his excerpt in there in regards to the Berbers and who the Berbers were. And in this case, the Berbers were also fit in the description of the Mediterranean people because of the territory that we encompass. So it's letting you know that all of these folks historically were the same people, or at least come from the same stock. All right, and that's why we call ourselves Anglo-Saxon Berbers. All right, so Giuseppe Sergi's much debated book, The Mediterranean Race, argued that the Mediterranean race had likely originated from a common ancestral stock that evolved in the Sahara region or the eastern part of Africa, in the region of the Great Lakes near the sources of the Nile, including Somalia, and which later spread from there to populate North Africa. And remember, this is a theory, all right? And the Circo-Mediterranean region. Sergi added that the Mediterranean race in its external characters is a brown human variety. So, like, brothers and sisters, us here in America, you are brown, copper complexion, brown colored people, you know. And I'm going to, probably not in this video, maybe in another lecture, I'm going to talk about what I feel, based off my research, the origin of the humans, when we come from. And it's definitely not in these territories that we're talking about right now. All right, so it says, Sergi added that the Mediterranean race in its external characters is a brown human variety, neither white nor negroid, but pure in its elements. That is to say, not a product of the mixture of whites with Negroes or Negroid peoples. He explained this taxonomy as inspired by understanding of the morphology of the skull as revealing those internal physical characters of human stocks which remain constant through long ages and at far remote spots. As a zoologist can recognize the character of an animal species or variety belonging to any region of the globe or any period of time, so also should an anthropologist if he follows the same method of investigating the morphological characters of the skull. This method has guided me in my investigations into the present problem and has given me unexpected results, which were often afterwards confirmed by archaeology or history. So these brothers wasn't, like I said, they weren't just speculating. They were doing the research, and they were tying that research together based off of historical evidence from other past researchers in regards to the human genome and how human beings have evolved throughout time in certain locations and territories, and how to be able to track the locations of where certain folks come from, based off of how their skull developed and how they look over periods of time. And if they notice that things didn't change, then they can literally agree that they were here for quite some time compared to when you go to other locations. Those people should look a certain way. And if these folks end up migrating and living amongst, the indigenous people at that time, you will start seeing a change not only in the skulls, but you'll see traces of the original folks who migrated, the new foreigner folks who came in and end up mixing in what the indigenous folks who were there at that time. Hopefully that makes sense. It says, according to Sergi, the Mediterranean race was the greatest race of the world and was singularly responsible for the most accomplished civilizations of antiquity, including those of ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Persia, ancient Rome, Carthage, Hittite, Anatolia, land of Punt, Mesopotamia, and Phoenicia. Now, remember, we already did the book, our research from L.A. Waddell. The Phoenician origin of Britons and Scots and Anglo-Saxons. Excuse me, there we go. Alright, it's showing you that the Anglo-Saxons, the Britons, and Scots are all related or descendants of the ancient Phoenicians. Alright. And it says the four great branches of the Mediterranean stock were the Libyans, which are Berbers. We told you we are Anglo-Saxon Berbers. And we already showed you that the Anglo-Saxons were related to the Phoenicians. So all of these people are related. The Ligurians, the Pelasgians, and the Iberians. Iberians, once again, all the same folks. Ancient Egyptians, Ethiopians, and Somalis were considered by Sergi as Hamites, themselves constituting a Mediterranean variety and one situated close to the cradle of the stock. To Sergi, the Semites were a branch of the Euro-Africans who were closely related to the Mediterraneans. He also asserted that the light-skinned Nordic race descended from the Euro-Africans. All right. Let's see. And it says in the U.S., the idea that the Mediterranean race included certain populations on the African continent was taken up in the early 20th century by African American writers such as W.E.B. Du Bois. So W.E.B. Du Bois also believed in the Mediterranean race, all right, who used it to attack white supremacist ideas about racial purity. Such publications as the Journal of Negro History stressed the cross-fertilization of cultures between Africa and Europe and adopted Sergi's view that the civilizing race had originated in Africa itself. H.J. Wells referred to the Mediterranean race as the Iberian race. Like, again, we already spoke about that. And these are people who don't look like you and who will look different than you and I, according to, modern terminology. All right, and the physical traits. So this is the conclusion from what the Mediterranean race was known as the Old Celtic race. So the first physical and social description of the Mediterranean race, then termed the Celtic race, was given by the Scottish author William Rhine in 1851. The Celtic race, Galatai and Pyrene, are characterized by a well-formed head, elongated from front to back and moderate in breadth, face oval, features well-defined and elegantly formed, complexion dark. dark brown or black eyes, black hair turning early gray, form middle size, handsome, feet and hands small, mental powers quick, active, and energetic rather than profound, passions and affections strong, fond of society but not forgetful of injuries, monarchical in their governments. They occupy the southern and insular parts of Europe. Now, pause. Now, melanated people, once again, we always talk about what? Kings and queens, kings and queens, kings and queens. We are those folks who are the descendants of monarchies. That's the reason why we have a monarchical form of government. Us Anglo-Saxon Berbers, we are us English people. We have a monarchy, our king and queen. You know, unfortunately, a lot of our brothers and sisters forgot because they have been placed underneath a new form of indoctrination underneath the territory that they occupy. But as you can see, once you do the research, our predecessors and where we come from were monarchical in nature. All right. And like they say, and they occupied the southern and insular parts of Europe, which all these territories were all kingdoms. And then we're going to go to, according to William Z. Zip Ripley, not the same Ripley, believe it or not, that's not the same Ripley. William Z. Ripley, the marked features of the Mediterranean race were dark hair, dark eyes, a long face, dolichocephalic skull, and a variable nose, narrow nose. All right. And so we're going to go ahead and check out William Ripley. So remember, these people were, this is right after 1865 Emancipation Proclamation. This is all during the Enlightenment movement where science, you know, was very big. During this time, like they really took a large interest in, you know, understanding the human species and our origins. And it's a lot different than today, you know, where we're not actually focusing on, you know, the human being and our origins as much and put them in classifications according to even similar to like dog breeds or any other breed of animal. But there is a variety of humans. Unfortunately, that's not something we like to accept, but it is the truth. Human beings do come in a lot of forms, shapes, sizes, and varieties. All right, that's just nature. William Zabini Ripley, born October 13th, 1867 to August 16, 1941, was an American economist, lecturer at Columbia University, professor of economics at MIT, professor of political economy at Harvard University, and anthropologist of race. Now, we understand that the United States does not use anthropology for their classification of races and ethnicity. We understand that. But you need to know because it also still kind of ties into you knowing what you need to be checking based off of once you do your genealogy. And this information will help you, or it can help you. All right, so his contribution to the anthropology, oh, hold on, missed it. So Ripley was famous for his criticisms of American railroad and economics and American business practices in the 1920s and 30s, and later for his tripartite racial theory of Europe. His contribution to the anthropology of race was later taken up by racial physical anthropologists, eugenicists, white supremacists, nordicists, and racists in general, and it was considered a valid academic work at the time. So remember, this was a valid academic work, so you know it's only going to make sense that we're going to investigate it. And considered a valid academic work at the time, although today is considered to be a prime example of scientific racism and pseudoscience. All right, so like as we can see, our reality is constantly changing up. Our modern reality is refuting what they consider science or what they consider a form of academia now is considered or is now shunned. But we can't do that because our reality is still predicated based off of this information, whether we want to accept that or not. So as we travel back in time, we get the ability to see how their mind saw things and was they keeping things more factual and why today, unfortunately, why we don't focus on it. But let's go ahead and see what Brother William Zabini Ripley, with all of these accolades, what his research, or his anthropological research, what did it bring him to the conclusion of when it comes down to race and who, or the description of these people. All right, so his career, the races of Europe, and I want to do the races of Europe because once again, Mike Epps said he's white, he has European ancestry. All right, cool. So the races of Europe in 1899, he authored a book. That's William Ripley authored a book titled "The Races of Europe: A Sociological Study," which had grown out of a series of lectures he had given at the Lowell Institute at Columbia in 1896. Like many Americans of his time, at every level of education, Ripley believed that the concept of race was explanatory of human difference. Even further, he believed it to be the central engine to understanding human history. Although his work also afforded strong weight to environmental and non-biological factors, such as traditions, he believed, as he wrote in the introduction of Races of Europe, that race, properly speaking, is responsible only for those peculiarities, mental or bodily, which are transmitted with constancy along the lines of direct physical descent from father to son. All right, so we talk about from father to son. Now remember, a lot of the European countries are patrilineal by nature. Only over here in America, because of Part 2 Sequitur, but into them, they disconnected that. It no longer became patrilineal. It's operating matrilineal. And we know a lot of the original American Indians operated matrilineal. Now, when we did the lesson of Brother Frederick Douglass, he said that the issues that's going on with America is because America is operating backwards, and they're not utilizing the status of the father, the patrilineal side, any longer. This was during slavery. So in slavery, they weren't utilizing patrilineal side of the father. So slavery was not based off of the patriarchal principles. Period. It was based off of corporatocracy, corporate principles. All right. So now we can see when they were doing race, or from underneath William Ripley, he's speaking in regards to most of the things about the mental or our body, and is directly transmitted from the father to the son. So many mental traits, attitudes, or proclivities, on the other hand, which reappear persistently in successive populations, may be derived from an entirely different source. All right, so certain things we get from the father, certain things you get from the mother. This is what he's pretty much breaking down. They may have descended collaterally along the lines of purely mental suggestion by virtue of mere social contact with preceding generations. All right, so Ripley's book, written to help find blah blah, you don't have to worry about that. But we want to now go to the book, The Races of Europe, a Sociological Study. All right, and we go specifically to page 60. This is The Races of Europe. All right, I'll show you. He has a map. Fortunately, I can't turn it sideways for you to see it, but pretty much speaking in regards to the color of the skin and letting you know the color of black, brown, so-called white, mixed, yellow, reddish variables, etc. And he had them all mapped out. All right, so going straight to page 60. In respect of the color of the skin, we may roughly divide the human species into 4 groups indicated upon our world map. The jet or coal black color is not very widespread. So very dark skin, or what we consider black brothers and sisters, that color, almost like we said coal, it only exists in a very narrow part of the world. That's not all over. And we never see that complexion or color being produced here in America unless it's coming from brothers and sisters who come from these territories who are now occupying this space. Alright, so it says it occurs in a narrow and more or less broken belt across Africa, just south of the Sahara Desert, with a few scattering bits farther south on the same continent. Another center of dissemination of this characteristic, although widely separated from it, occurs in the islands southeast of New Guinea in the Pacific Ocean, in a district which is known from the dark color of its populations as Melanesia. So we know our brothers and sisters in Melanesia are very dark skinned. You know, like he said, very similar to the color jet black or coal black. All right. Now, he's grouping. Now, these are the 4 different categories. All right. He's talking about. So we're talking about the first category, which is the dark jet black coal complexion. All right. Next, succeeding this type in depth of color is the main body of Negroes, of Australians, and of the Aborigines of India. So he's saying that same color complexion, the Aborigines of India are coal or jet black. And he's also saying that Aborigines of Australia are this as well, which we know is true based off of the research that we all can do right now today. All right, this second or brownish group, this the second group. So we spoke about who the first group was. Now the first group, that color complexion, they didn't say anything about America. But now we're on the second group. The second or brownish group in the above named order shades off from deep chocolate. So we know the deep chocolate color, I will be considered deep chocolate. So from the deep chocolate through coffee color down to olive and light or reddish brown. The American Indians fall within this class. Are you hear that? So the American Indians, the original indigenous people to America, fall in this class as a deep chocolate. That's me. Coffee color. Look at the color of coffee. There's the original indigenous people to America are these colors. So this is many of our brothers and sisters who are now identified as black, which, as you read, true black is coal color or jet black. And only a few territories produce that, and that's not produced in America. So the American Indians wouldn't be that complexion, but the American Indians will be, like he said, dark chocolate or coffee color, which we see many of our brothers and sisters who look like me today will fit that description. All right, the American Indians, once again, like you said, fall within this class because while reddish in tinge, the skin has a strong brown undertone. All right, so many of, like we see that red or that brown undertone, which that give us that copper color. In the Americas, we found the color quite variable, ranging all the way from the dark Peruvians and the Mexicans to the Aborigines north of the United States. All right, so the Aborigines, that's you, brothers and sisters. That is y'all. Y'all the Aborigines or indigenous people to America. But remember, many different people came to America prior to the colonization of America via 1600 charters. A lot of these nations already came over here doing trades back and forth. And that's the reason why we say the English Empire existed here even before the so-called charters. But we'll talk about that down the road. All right, so the Polynesians are allied to the second group, characterized by a red-brown skin. A third class in which the skin is of a yellow shade covers most of Asia, the northern third of Africa, and Brazil. So these are all the people, like I said, because now we're going to the third group. So we did the reds, the red group, the Aborigines, here in America. Also, too, will still fit the description of those original people from the Mediterranean race, which they call the old Celtic race. All right, so like he's saying here, a third class in which the skin is of yellow shade covers most of Asia, the northern third of Africa, and Brazil, including a number of widely scattered people such as the Laps, the Eskimos, the Hottentots, and Bushmen of South Africa. Together, and so like we know, the Bushmen of South Africa, they do have a yellow tinge, like the the Khoi people, or the San people, San Khoi people, have a yellow tinge to them. They don't have the red tinge, even though they're brown, but they have a yellow tinge to their complexion. Together with most of the people of Malaysia. Among these, the skin varies from a dull leather color through a golden or buff to a muddy white. In all cases, the shading is no wise continuous or regular. Africa contains all three types of color, from the black Dinkas to the yellow Hottentots. In Asia and the Americas, all tints obtain except the jet black. You hear this? So the jet black tint you can't get here in America. So therefore, the term Negro, which means black, is a misnomer. It's an oxymoron, brothers and sisters. You can't be something that actually can't really be produced here. All right. So there are all grades of transitional shading. Variations within the same tribe are not inconsiderable. So no really real sharp line and demarcation anywhere occurs. The fourth color group, which we have to study in this paper. Now, this is what's very important, because once again, we talk about Brother Mike Epps. All right. And he can also be connected to, like we say, the American indigenous. He can be also indigenous here as well. But we're speaking specifically from what he said. Let me go ahead and go back to the video. Where's the video?
Yeah. Oh, good Lord, waiting on me. No, you did. Did it like, oh, you're not like that. I said, who am I like? He said, African dudes, because I'm thinking I'm black. Man, I'm getting my shit.
Right. Go back to what he said.
Popped up in the second box. I'm white.
He's white. All right. So once again, Epps history, family crest, coats of arms, because we're eventually about to be coming to the end. So I just want to start wrapping things on up. The ancestors of the name Epps date back to the days of the Anglo-Saxon tribes of Britain. The name is derived from their residence near one or more notable aspen trees. The surname Epps is derived from the Old English word apse, which means aspen. The surname may also be a nickname in jest for a timid person, referring to the trembling leaves of the tree. However, one source notes that the name may be a genitive form of ape or ap, a personal name, before 1066 on the Domesday. All right, so that's the etymology of the history of Epps, or Mike Epps' surname, excuse me. And then once again, we hear are the categories and the definitions underneath the race and ethnicity data standards underneath the Statistical Policy Directive 15 for the federal government here in the United States. He's here in the so-called territory called the United States. He, like I said, he's claimed to be, I'm white. All right. Epps, Anglo-Saxon. This will be English. From England, okay. White, individuals with origins and of the original peoples of Europe, including, for example, English and German. All right. So we already showed you that. From science, says the average African American genome, for example, is nearly a quarter European. Okay, so that corroborates to what he's saying. He's white. The first physical social description of the Mediterranean race, the then term Celtic race, was given by the Scottish. Remember, the Scotland is where? It's in Great Britain. Author William Rhind in 1851. The Celtic race are characterized by a well-formed head, elongated from front to back and moderate in breadth, face oval, features well-defined and elegantly formed, complexion dark. Dark complexion, but he's white, which fits underneath original peoples of Europe, including, for example, English. Genetic studies showing that nearly African Americans had a quarter European blood. Yeah, I want to come to, I was going to go ahead and do Giuseppe Sergi, but we kind of read a little bit about him. To the Races of Europe, Sociological Study by William Z. Ripley. So we explained that the complexion of the American Indians were coffee, chocolate, dark coffee, all the way up to the reds, to what we see today, to which can also fit the complexion of brother Mike Epps. But you also see he has a yellow tone to him as well. All right, so the fourth color, and this was the important one, the fourth color group which we have to study in this paper is alone, highly concentrated in the geographical sense. It forms the so-called white race. All right, although many of its, go to the next page, many of its members are almost brown and often yellow in skin color. And we shall show its real determinant characteristic is paradoxically not the skin at all, but the pigmentation of the hair and eyes. So we ain't worrying about the skin. They're talking about the hair and the eyes. But they're telling you that the skin color of the original people who will be classified as so-called white are brown and often yellow in skin color. Look at Mike Epps. He fits that description. So the folks who will be classified as white, as we can see, Anglo-Saxons, tribes of Britain, who the Epps family, who Mike Epps is classified as white, which is recognized as part of the categories and definitions underneath the federal government OMB Statistical Policy Directive on Race and Ethnicity Data Standards, which is recognized in all forms of government from the state level to the local level to the federal level. And it says that white people are individuals with origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, including, for example, English. And those people, the fourth color group, which we have to study in this paper, is alone highly concentrated in the geographical sense. It forms the so-called white race, although many of its members are almost brown and often yellow in skin color. So, brothers and sisters, as you can see, many of you have been hoodwinked to think that white people is based off of skin tone when it has nothing to do with skin tone. Genealogy will tell you where you come from. And so, there you have it. With the help of brother Mike Epps, oops, it clicked off, we were able to prove and show that he was right, that he does, in fact, have European ancestry. I'm gonna pull it back up. I'm gonna play it one last time. One second. And many of you brothers and sisters, you also have European ancestry. You just have to do your genealogy, do the research. I mean, it takes time, but if you really care about who you are, so that way you don't be traveling all over the world looking crazy, because of you not knowing who you truly are, when yet other people in the world do know who you are. But you don't want to be that because of, you feel that you're losing out by not claiming who and what you truly are. And what you truly are can be defined in blood. I mean, so like you say, like the man on the dime. Look like his nose. Look, he got the aquiline nose, which I will pull it up, but I don't really have too much time. But he's explaining, and this is what science, ethnologists or anthropologists know we're utilizing to be able to cooperate with the group that you claim you descend from. And it clearly shows that he not only have done the research, but he can prove it because of, you know, what he's able to show from the anthropological standpoint, as well the ethnological standpoint, you know, which he's doing right now. All right, so you may think it's a joke, but within the joke, there's the truth, and we have the truth right now about Brother Mike Epps, who actually is an Englishman. So if he started calling himself Mike Epps an Englishman, it would make more sense. But for those of you who are now listening to the stream, will now know that that's technically what he's saying without saying it. He is an Englishman. You know, he is the true white man. And it may be funny to you, but it holds significant value to those in the know.
I've been talking all this black power shit and I'm white as hell.
See, exactly. And it's funny to him, but he's telling the truth. He's telling the truth. So it goes to show you. Not only he fits the Celtic race, because the Celtic race composes the territory we call Europe. The Scotsmen are actually ancient, what they call it, ancient Irish. It's all the same people. The ancient Celts, it's all the same people. And he knows this. Sorry about that. So now, brothers and sisters, now you know. Now you know that is who you are, and you can prove it through genealogy. And once you have that proof, just be who you are. Just be who you are. Just be your people.
Ain't that a bitch? You know the crazy thing about...
All right, so like we say, knowledge is power, and knowledge of self is the best power you can have this day and time. Like I said, a lot is going on in the world, but you forgetting who you are would be one of the worst things that can happen to you, especially. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, I love you. Stay tuned for the next live. Hopefully I don't have many hiccups as I had with this one, but it is Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde, you know, causes issues with communication, so it may delay, but it don't deny it. Sometimes you just got to work through it, especially if it's meant. And it seems like I'm a little bit more active now because, you know, I was born on a Mercury retrograde, so it normally works in my favor. With that being said, please stay tuned for the next one. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Take care of your loved ones. Make sure you drink your water. Take care of your body. And I'll see you, brothers and sisters, on the next live. Peace.